Now, speaking of issues where people maybe need to take an I don't know position, but also err on the side of respect, Talk Heathen isn't afraid to get into those issues that are complex, that get a little dirty from time to time. And so that is what this next clip will set up, and we'll talk about it, and we'll try and not suck at it.
No, I have not had this conversation with somebody who's trans.
So I will tell you from experience, I fucked up. And maybe me giving you my fucked up story can help. Okay?
Go for it.
All right. So I said earlier on, I have a friend that came out. They're actually a trans advocate and a amazing human being, wonderful friend of mine. And they were, I have said they, if you go back, I haven't said he or she, I've been saying they, because they decided that they wanted to go by that. And so it was interesting for me. I'd never really come across it. And I said, why? And they said, well, because when I take a look at, the difference between sex and gender, and you know the difference between sex and gender, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So when you're looking at gender and you're looking at gender stereotypes, my friend took a look at both of both of them and went, you know what? That's me, but that's me too. And I'm actually like that, but I'm also like that. And so if I went binary and said, I'm really female or I'm really male, you would be excluding something truly important to them. And so they asked me to use the gender pronoun they, them. And I said, so you're like Pat.
But
I said,
my problem is,
hold on. I said you're like.
My problem is,
well, hold on. Let me just finish. I said, so you're like Pat from the Saturday Night Live sketch.
Right. It's Pat.
And I didn't realize it. They were really gracious, and they said, Eric, I know you love me, and I know that you wouldn't intentionally hurt me. Pat was a joke character, and Pat really was the absence of gender, when in reality, when you look at they, them, and you look at those different gender, classifications like that, it's trying to best put a pin on who you are. And I'm speaking as a dude that is not experiencing this currently. So I'm doing the best that I can. I can tell you that I cringe, and I am so ashamed of having been like, oh, so you want to be a genderless joke. But we do live in a society where people who are outward and are trans and in the community, they face people who want to kill them. There are lists of people, trans people in the United States who are murdered every year, and it's really tragic. And the thing is you need to focus, really, Carl, you need to focus on, it's less about whether or not you offended them, and it's a whole lot more about whether or not they're safe to live in the world that we inhabit, right? That's the important part. And if you're worried about offending somebody, be honest, be open. Holy moly. I can't tell you how many times I've screwed up, and how many times I've needed to learn, and how many times I've had to admit that I was wrong, or maybe, I'm right every once in a while, but you put yourself out there, because when you're authentic, when you're genuine, you're not going to offend them. And if you do, maybe they've got something else going on in their life, but that's not your problem. I mean, just try to be caring, try and be empathetic. I guarantee it's going to get you far.
I think that Eric makes a really good point, that ultimately just honesty and compassion comes first. It's not always about these specific actions, because we don't always know how to act in complex situations involving sex and gender and our friends and family who we love and any transitioning. I mean, it's confusing, but ultimately hold up just being honest and being compassionate. And a lot of the time you work with someone that you're trying to make sure that you're showing respect for, and it works out. You don't have to complicate it a whole lot more than that. I think that Eric, once again, models good behavior on this stuff. Yeah, you're gonna mess up for sure, and you can't beat yourself up about it too much. Just be open, honest, and ready to learn about this stuff above all.
Right. And I want to remind people that bigotry has to do with being intolerant of people, not being intolerant of ideologies or beliefs. So let's say you genuinely don't believe being trans is a thing. I think you're wrong, but let's say you believe that. I think at the end of the day, what's important here is don't be a dick. Don't be an asshole to people because you don't agree with their beliefs. And the problem is, so I've done lots of things with trans people and non-binary people on my channel, and they are always attacked personally as though what they identify as has somehow offended the person watching this thing, and they attack them. They start speculating about their genitals, and they just start being an asshole right off the bat. And honestly, I think the thing you should be thankful about, even if you don't believe that the reasons these people's identity are what they are, is that you aren't going through and having the same life experience this person is, because you were born as a cis human being, a cisgendered person. That's great for you. Other people don't feel that way, and whatever the reasoning is, they're going through what is very real for them. So I don't care whether or not you disagree. You are not the arbiter of people going around. And by the way, I've yet to see it actually be a person who is a scientist who's familiar with these topics that are going out and saying, no, absolutely not. And in fact, let's use the pronouns they don't want to hear and purposefully hurt them because that's what's best for them. That shit doesn't really happen. Jordan Peterson tried to take a go at that, have a go at that. And his representation of his argument turned out to be totally false. It was predicated on this idea of a law that would make it illegal to misgender somebody, which wasn't true. Yeah. Just don't be an asshole and don't come up with these stupid arbitrary rules for why you are not going to, at the end of the day, give people what they feel is true of themselves. We've already seen this before with gender orientation. We've seen it with race. And I'm sure that there are countless other examples of people just deciding, because I'm certain that this couldn't be the case, because it attacks my masculinity or attacks what I think about myself. I'm sure that this has been a repeating pattern, and this will just be the next one that has to be taken care of. But anyway, I'll get off my pissed off box.
And I don't think that as far as name changing or pronoun change, I don't think this is actually that new of an issue, because in certain religions, I mean, you'll hear some Orthodox people say that they have a name and they have a Christian name. And so some people will go by their Christian name at all times, right? And so we've already been dealing with calling someone something different, maybe partway through their life after one name has been established and they want to establish a different name. So there are people that have already dealt with this. And a lot of them, I would say probably a majority, are religious people that have dealt with this kind of issue. And it's not really much of an issue in society, but when it comes to trans things, then yeah, people just flip their shit. And it's kind of ridiculous. I think that there tend to be underlying reasons, like real reasons, why people wouldn't want to use certain pronouns and a different name for someone other than like, oh, it's inconvenient or whatever. I think that a lot of the time that's just, that's a front for something else. I can't say for everyone, but I think that's what I've seen. But you can't pretend that this is just a new thing that's happening. In so many ways, this has been an established process that people have gone through for basically all of human history.
And while we're on the topic, can we stop with the bullshit of like, but what matters here is the language. I'm not going to say zir, zer, because those words are made up. Words are always made up. And if it's somebody you know and somebody you care about, and if you give a shit about not making people feel like shit about themselves, fucking respect it. There's going to be lots to learn. There's still lots of science to figure out. By the way, to those who are their hardline, nope, everything is just whatever's between your legs. The science isn't looking good in your favor, especially as it develops more. But I digress. Stop pretending you're a fucking like grammar champion. And this next clip actually kind of speaks to that a little bit here.
You had a caller who was confused about whether or not they could actually be used as a grammatically correct singular person pronoun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I know the answer.
And it can be. Unfortunately, as someone who works in an English department and goes to school in English departments, I encounter this all the time I tell people my pronoun is they, and they're like, oh, I'm so sorry. I can't. Like, I respect your gender identity, but I can't use that pronoun. It doesn't sit with me because it's grammatically incorrect. And that's BS.
So
because,
why is that BS?
Well, first of all, that's thinly veiled transphobia. And the
Eric.
thing is, we use non-gendered pronouns all the time.
Could you give me an
For
example?
instance, yeah, I have students who often leave stuff in my class. And so, like, when someone leaves their glasses in my classroom, I will say, hey, who left their glasses? Because I don't know if it's a student who is male, female, trans, whatever. And that is referring to one person with a non-gendered pronoun in the singular sense.
So you're saying
Now,
that anytime you don't know whether or not the pronoun is he or she or whatever, that we naturally go to they, them?
We do. And that's been happening since the late 1800s.
Oh, okay, so it's not just some newfangled SJW.
So what you're saying is that the social justice warriors invented this last week, and now they're trying to destroy our grammar? That thing that we're so proud of?
Yeah, so the actual point here is not only is they, them acceptable, it already is a non-binary pronoun. It already is a non-binary pronoun, and if you don't know the gender of a person you're talking about, you use it in place of a gendered pronoun. That's not always been the case. They even mentioned that it was back in the 1800s that it's changed, but language already evolves and develops. And I think people might wonder why we're bringing up this issue again, but I think it is important, especially to the atheist community, because one, this is one of those places where the atheist community, to a person who is actually trans, does not appear to be a welcoming place. And the atheist community should be a community for anybody who is not a bigot and an asshole and a dick. And so these are people who just want people to recognize that I've gone through this and it took forever to figure out who I am, and finally I'm making sense of it, and not be met with just assholes saying no. And by the way, I, Mr. fucking nobody, am going to tell you that you can only choose these identities to be from, and your identity is invalid. Just, I think I've said it 9 times now, but don't be a dick.
Even if it was totally grammatically incorrect to say they, to refer to just, a single person. Why is that more important? Why is it more important to be grammatically correct than to not be a dick? Like, why shouldn't it be more important for you to respect someone that you apparently respect their identity? Shouldn't it be more important for you to do that than to speak in a way that's grammatically correct? It makes no sense. It's a ridiculous set of priorities.
I absolutely think I agree with you 100%. And here we are, 2 cisgender dudes talking about gender, and by no means are we either the arbiters of what's right with this issue. But it is useful, I think, to broadcast allyship. And the fact of the matter is, we're still in this place right now where a trans person with a platform, their platforms don't do as well as others. Some of that's the algorithm on YouTube, for example. If you post pro-LGBT stuff, because of the way the algorithm hits it and flags things, it's less likely to make its way out there. So be an ally and stop being a dick.
Yeah, I think everyone has the right to speak on whatever issue. But when it comes to actually trying to gain a more subjective or personal perspective on these issues, you kind of should listen to someone who's gone through some of this stuff. So yeah, like, cool, listen to me. I wouldn't be talking if I didn't think that you should listen to what I have to say about it. But go out and make sure that you're actually informing your perspective with a few different viewpoints, especially including people who are actually trans.
Yeah. And stop strawmanning the situation. And fuck, dude, no one's going to make you fuck a trans person. That's not what this is at the end of the day. But by the way, they're lovely people, and it's a wonderful experience.